Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg. Hello to you both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. To you first, Mr Carmichael, if I may. Can she hold on?
Well, of course, it's important to demonstrate consistency and permanency, if you like. And this is a good time to be saying, look, I'm thinking about going on, because at the moment the political situation is really surprisingly calm. But I do think that there are some risks ahead, because of course Brexit is a very challenging issue, and I think there will be political turbulence around that subject. And of course you can't really predict what kind of events are going to emerge around and about. So it's sensible to think in terms of being Prime Minister and wishing to lead the government, and she's the only person who can, I think, at the moment. I was very, very keen to support her when she first launched her bid, and I think that she's the right person to have as Prime Minister now. But I do think there are risks ahead.
But isn't she the reason you lost your seat?
Well, certainly calling the general election when she did wasn't, I think, the wisest thing to have done. And I think the way in which the campaign actually unfolded was extremely unhelpful. The manifesto was particularly unhelpful because, of course, we didn't talk about the economy, and there was a really good story to tell. We've got over 31 million people employed. The situation with the British economy now is sharply better than it was back in 2010, and I think we should have talked about that. There should have been a narrative about the things that we had done and the plans that we had beyond winning the election when we did. And, of course, the key thing about a good leader is expressing a vision.
You're not answering my question, Mr Carmichael. Sorry to interrupt you there. We know what the manifesto said, and that was then, this is now. Is it her fault you lost your seat?
I think it's a combination of things. I'm not going to blame the Prime Minister entirely, although she accepted full responsibility in a very generous letter she sent to me and the other 32 who were also defeated. So she accepts that there is some responsibility. But you can't just blame the Prime Minister. I think that the way in which the manifesto was launched, I think the way in which it was written, and I think a number of other factors came into play which did not help our campaigning. And of course, you have to remember that the Labour Party campaigned well.
Okay, we'll come back to that. I'm not interested in the Labour Party today. I'm not talking about that. Mr Rees-Mogg, the Prime Minister accepted responsibility for Mr Carmichael and others losing their seats. Is that fair?
Well, if she accepted it, that's what she did. Yes, that's a perfectly fair thing for leaders to do. And it's a sign of strong leadership that you take responsibility when things go less well than you hoped, as well as when they're very successful. So I think she deserves credit for being honest and straightforward.
Some of your colleagues are saying she's delusional today, to think that she'll be able to hang on until 2022.
Well, I think loyalty has long been the Tory party's secret weapon, but one that's been a bit of abeyance recently. And I think it's important to back our leader. It's important to have clarity and stability during the Brexit negotiations, that Mrs May is doing a good job in those negotiations. She is offering leadership and clarity of purpose, but above all, she's doing her duty. It can't be easy to be Prime Minister at the moment, and she is putting the interests of the nation ahead of her own personal interests and the responsibility that she has taken to offer us good leadership. And I think that's really impressive and deserves support.
Decent Brexit deal is what you need, Mr Carmichael, as a party in order for the Prime Minister to stay in post. Do you agree?
Yes, I do think we need a good outcome from the Brexit negotiations. I think that it's really important that we signal that we can land well once we leave the European Union, because that's one of the key issues that's actually around at the moment. Does the business world feel comfortable with it? And what about the rest of the EU 27? We've got to have good relationships with them when we leave. It's going to be necessary actually to have good relationships with them now, because the sort of the deals that we want will require acceptance and support from the EU 27. And then, of course, there's this question of what we do about trade deals beyond the European Union, and we can see that obviously in Japan, for example, there is concern, as expressed by the Japanese government, that some issues need to be clearer, more transparent than they currently are. Now, I think all of that adds up to a very difficult few months ahead. Not that it's going to derail Brexit necessarily, but that what we do need to make sure is that we're very clear about what we are intending to do. And I think the Prime Minister is best placed to do that of all the other possibilities and contentions.
Interestingly, Mr Rees-Mogg, the Labour Party is waiting in the wings, is it not, for your party to tear itself apart? If not the Prime Minister's fault, then whose?
Well, a moment ago you didn't want to talk about the Labour Party, but as we get on to
no,
them,
I'm not talking about the Labour Party. No, Mr Rees-Mogg, I'm not talking about the Labour Party. I'm saying that they are waiting for you to tear yourself apart as a party. I'm glad you both think it's funny because you've only got 6-seat majority. It's not great, is it?
Yeah. Well, what you're saying about the Labour Party is that they're the opposition, and it's perfectly obvious. Of course they would like to take over, but they're hugely divided on this. They change their policy as often as most people change their underpants. They have no idea what they're doing on Brexit. They're not fit to be in government. Their position is absurd.
Yeah, but they did terribly well in the last election, didn't they?
The Labour Party did well. The Conservatives got the highest share of the vote since 1983. But what's really interesting about the last election is that we've gone back to a two-party system and that the minority parties were really washed away in the last election. And that's brought us back to a type of politics that we haven't had since the early 70s, and that will have long-term consequences on how policy and politics are conducted in the UK. And of course the Labour Party views itself as an alternative government, but if it is, it's not a serious one.
Your leader thought it was a walk in the park. That's why she called the election when she did. That's why Mr Carmichael, although he thinks it's funny, lost his seat, and that's why you had to rely on the DUP in order to be in power.
Well, actually, the Conservative vote went up as a share of the popular vote in the election. There were difficulties with the campaign. It would be foolish to pretend otherwise. The DUP are a very respectable party in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is a part of the United Kingdom. It is perfectly reasonable for them to support the government that there is, and Mrs May leads that, and long may she continue to lead that. She is doing her duty, and she's doing it calmly and intelligently.
Let's bring in the views of, that's the parliamentary party. They both think it's pretty funny. What do the Tory grassroots think? Let's speak to the co-editor of the Conservative Woman, Laura Perrins. Hello to you, Laura. Thanks for joining us. The two chaps that we've just been talking to think it's quite funny that we should be talking about the Labour Party, not talking about the Labour Party, whether they should change their underpants or not. We might be looking for a new Prime Minister very soon.
So I think the most important question here, Kay, is what is in the interests of Britain, what's in the best interest of the country as a whole. And clearly, it would not be in Britain's best interest for Theresa May to lead the Conservative Party into the next election. It's true that they need stability and they need to close out these Brexit negotiations, but this is an incredibly serious time for Britain. They must take control of these Brexit negotiations, and there are other significant issues that will go on in the economy in the background, and eventually the party must select a new leader that is a firmly Conservative leader, knows what he or she is talking about, and has firm Conservative principles both on the economy, on Europe and on social matters also.
Yeah, incredibly serious time for the country, Mr Carmichael. No laughing matter.
You're absolutely right. It is a very serious issue for the party. What Jacob and I were laughing about was the sudden change back to the Labour Party when you told us we weren't supposed to talk about the Labour Party. But the actual serious issue is actually very much connected with Brexit and connected with our national interests and connected with our long-term prospects outside of the European Union. These are big issues. There are involving a huge number of tectonic plates, and they're all moving, and of course we've got to navigate the consequences of those movements, and that is, I think, where we need strong and effective leadership. It's where we need a kind of a narrative, and I think the Prime Minister will be extremely wise to take the opportunity when she has it at the next party conference, which is in October, to actually sketch out her vision, not just about Brexit, though that's important, but about what kind of Britain she intends to have and how she's going to get us to that point, because that was something else that was absent during the general election and which I think the country really needs to know about. So the serious point is actually this is about how our nation actually responds to all of these challenges ahead of us, which are coming along each and every month, and also how it is that we sketch out a role for ourselves beyond the European Union. And I think those two things are obviously interconnected, but continue to have very weighty questions behind them.
Final word to you, Mr Rees-Mogg.
Neil's analysis has a lot to commend it. We need a Conservative government that gets on with the business of getting a good deal as we leave the European Union, that is able to conduct the negotiations satisfactorily and ensures that by the end of March 2019 we have left the European Union in accordance with the wishes of the British people, something the Labour Party seems quite incapable of understanding. So I think there's a good deal of agreement between us, and we need good Conservative government on the basis of Conservative principles. And that, I think, is what Mrs May...
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.